Great.
He literally just went to
Oh, and I am literally not worried at all. When I was a freshman here, scouting the Shirley, I sat back over there in this room, round 8, for Burstein and Wickersham against, oh man, Dartmouth, against Brian Smith and somebody. And I was just like total googly-eyed freshman. I just like slugged it out. It was awesome.
Was this a prelim for round 8?
It was round 8 on the China topic. And they were intimidatingly good. So what I'm saying is, I associate this room, because I didn't take many classes either, I associate this room with great debates. We're gonna blow it up here. This is gonna be fun.
Good.
Then I will also be back in a second.
Sweet.
There's a one online if you already have it.
That would have been November 2005. And that Cal team, Burstein and Wickersham, I don't know, they lost they won like 32 debates in a row. And the debate I scouted here, round 8 that year, was right in the middle of it.
Oh, wow. 32 debates in a row.
Something like that, just something crazy.
So they won 2 tournaments in a row? Or?
Yeah. Harvard, then here, and then maybe it ended at the coast, is that right? Oops.
Who won the MDT that year, though? Was it Dartmouth?
Michigan State. Casey Harrigan and Ryan Burke beat the Deeks in the finals. Brad Hall, Jaden Carroll. And so, yeah. So, like, it was just, I mean, it was a great year, and I was just, like, impressionable freshmen, and people were just so good.
Yeah.
It was fun. People are good now, too. It's fun watching your face. Whose paper can I steal? I keep meaning to steal paper from the Georgetown debater, so I
Yeah,
don't do
the
this.
shorter one.
We probably went there as the counter paper.
No, I'll go, I don't even care about the link, I just don't want to steal it from whoever's running oil.
That's all we got. You can go for it.
I'm happy to, if you have some. How much do you work in?
That's it, let's go for it.
So, that's
We have
great.
like more in the hotel, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Here.
I feel bad being day one. You have more in the hotel?
Yeah. Good. You want to look? Is that you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Advantage 1 is here some top unit officials conceded risk military attack high now starting 7-1. The three compensating consequently the deficit of some share with the weapon group to the zoning training where the high report 70 cases of legal session check sublated to Israel's one for its death block disc 50 iceberg and the impact extinction is intent that nuclear terrorism perception weapons massive nuclear weapons that shield of peaceful weapons here attack nuclear responsible suspicion with shifting the state process watching response to attack nuclear technology outrage on one spot possibility competition China and Russia risk of nuclear terrorism does one way compared to site to detention can only increase terrorism not present Roberts and Levendera no potential works criticized for group and stretch American 20 years detention or half of reduced violence going to have from much injuries and feelings spread jihadism from death and detention increased likelihood of future attacks will isolate the regional scenario 100% occurring trial prosecute distrust local population cause resentment kills effective counterterrorism operations halfway 13 federal force originally concerned military commission federal wards position well established legal and artificial legitimacy report about against terrorism permanent suppression can generate resentment distrust and undermining characters measure obvious population more likely cooperative collaborating than the weaker fairly in cooperation increased legitimacy United States actions also cause terrorism comparably outweighs military responses P code 6. The goal of effective counterterrorism strategy would be to fracture alliances of global, one's local, one's multilateral institutions, truth, United States action, legitimacy, cooperation, with other countries, and facilitate operational effectiveness and information and international safety standards of war and terrorism hearts and minds, with leads global cooperation, with others to address root cause of the issues, and appears to prove that backlash local populations over death and detention increase the threat of terrorism. Tyler, introduce measures to stimulate terrorists for proven top law and state individuals, political cooperation, and terrorists against all from backlash, received injustice, increase the likelihood of the terrorist attack scenario, choose intelligence, in-depth detention, destroys intel gathering, with your pathway 13 G, U.S. allies can only cooperate. Many extradition treaties with the Allies for extradition depending on arbitrary European courts British extradition procedures the authorized U.S. federal justice system finding they follow methodology of information center extradition prosecutor cooperation decisions sharing testimony of evidence and European intelligence sharing is key set a global framework itself terrorism U.S. short international law derails it fleshing Europe the discrimination effect to counteract terrorism operations and they regarding terrorism compliance with international increasing this region intelligence cooperation EU expanding to the terrorism transatlantic intelligence cooperation review back on international characters and sides shift their intelligence cooperation and the threat of terrorism in the UK's highest now intelligence cooperation to Worcester 926. Our objective is to strike the line of the plans with the line of copyright documented as they need more interest in normally attacking these on-call strike the political weapons world and the land attack the years Valentine's Day Hanukkah but the approach similar to attacks moved by the cellular intelligence sources and 12 and last year documents which include internal reported terrorist plots orchestrated by the against UK were pure gold and scenario 3's expedition allies will extradite terrorist suspects with the US over due process concerns destroys intel gathering and cause suspects to be released plan to keep Chris 11 the Aqua reports Wall Street International many parts of the US allies and novel to cooperate the United States over support of our efforts to survive terrorists. Many countries now have extradited individuals provide testimony other information assistance terrorist suspects. Court custom might be necessary to release these suspects that cause European safe havens really to WMD terrorism Ferguson for Al Qaeda. That's expressed from the interest WMD WMD multiple status separating most of the experts with TNW small from the Russian TNWs are various conditions and underlying this issue for great justice. Bulgaria, Czech, Yugoslavia, and HU, five terrorist incidents, illicit trafficking, Central Eastern Europe, power plants, or economic state to bench, use credibility, current handling of the trial process, destroys transatlantic alliance, specifically harms military cooperation with Germany and Britain, Paragraph 12. Direct is putting the alliance with European countries driven by the U.S. counterterrorism ground force space station by their own force and the cooperation in the future for how to prosecute charges intelligence and law being private prisons selected library British search force ran out European courts informed transfer Al Qaeda associated with Iraq the gap between the United States and European allies during 2006 went through U.S. agents for as when addition Britain, Poland, NATO, Lead Germany are now operating with a different set of constraints. America's close allies beginning to place more constraints on working with the United States NATO allied and contempt military operations on the two competing legal regimes. Some has to give might just be alliance and lack of trials destroys credibility the most legitimacy is key. legitimacy, Welsh led the global war on terrorism, also image America's, image America's like incredibly prayer, where just labor legitimacy, United States foreign terrorism is critical because terrorism is not a conventional threat, the most damaging detention, treatment, and trial of suspected terrorism legislation, the state allies, AUMF, Russia, and 13 legislation, CC, is concerned present meaningful ways of hearing accept international law, reviewed, postulated internationally, the attempt to make an active decision, one way, statutory form should absent the limited, mutual authorization, and interpretation, international geography, allies, and invitation, acknowledging the U.S. operation to conduct within traditional legal frameworks is important and is to mitigate infection with our allies and Britain and Germany are critical to NATO success. American engagement, Aronson, Keller, 12. Montana and London special relation with the United States position, self-transatlantic region, and security and defense of U.S. also valid military contributions. London was to make American-led operations UK as the Europe to my most powerful military since the Cold War. European defense and London's military power no longer spice and NATO decline first impact soft power, transatlantic cohesion key to solve every scenario of extinction. Hamilton, the 1913 British transatlantic partnership, regional conflict terrorism organized from poverty, population growth, environmental security, proliferation, demonstrate resource scarcity, position brought by which will fuel exploiting WMD proliferating biological weapons and security data there access state Nazi actors, absence countermeasures, Middle East remains factual regimes, or technology and terror, Central Asia is being a focal point competition of resources. China and Russia can testify their influence in leadership, taking trigger into global leadership and China leadership in Asia, military requiring attention. Africa remains vulnerable to guilt. Comes European States now called to mediate the impact of transatlantic partnership remains a vital part of as has been in the past. Keep things together, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. This has been the relation for transforming partnership enables the United States to useful another tool usually for effective global coalition. Transatlantic partnership remains indispensable to tackle the effectively and challenges we face. Second impact is hard power legitimacy makes deterrence effective. National legitimacy rather than deterrence is primarily but costing individuals to evade a law. They must consider their future rather than analyzing their policies perceived. My individuals throughout the world perceptions of legitimacy, greater across work institutions go beyond the self-interest and cost of government, and the plan's external oversight maintains hegemony. Legitimacy is vital. Internally to global stability. 2009, the strong problem producing for executive flexibility, splitting the franchise system to the United States government, the people of law, and influence by corporate transparency, accountability, laws, bolster stability, the system, and detaining policies exceedingly aggressive American rule breaking, will set up having exploiting hegemonic systems, the courts ready to form software, and the courts can bestow external legitimacy, explicit detention hurts America's image, strengthens the legitimacy of the United States and Germany, and establishing the quality benchmark legitimizes, courts can legitimize American leadership acts, solves extinction bar 9/11. We live in the greatest structural change in the global war, there lack of mass violence, some successful research in global war since World War II, the current globalization, U.S. military, the greatest force of peace in the afternoon, would be no civilization left the directional, the reign power, introduce democracy, human rights, liberation of Rome, doubling life, simple, increased GDP, program redemption, the conflict, 20th century, solid death toll, about 100 million college salaries, 99% relative drop, that's through the war, the U.S. emerged in project leader of globalization based on action, free trade rather than colonial. That's the plan. United States government should create a domestic territory with exclusive jurisdiction to resolve legal status, person, active work, attention to sovereignty. The U.S. Court of Appeals decision in Amicala versus Gray Rights create a legal black hole for detainees and active warning code 12 Amicala help the back detainees could seek a district from the United States Appeals Court versus decision means one because the location in active war precluded their access to federal court decision paradox for detainees legal black hole in domestic courts refuse for their habeas claims and Obama's already called on Congress to remove restrictions in Rogan in 13 Obama's called to issue head on when called Congress to remove restrictions transferring prisoners to the United States and look for the administration wants on prisoners to Germany. Obama's calling the public to support and detention of the prisoners if equal safely in order to put pressure on Congress and Neville closure of Guantanamo and inadequacy of commissions and civil trials means the DTC is key to primary impact. Military courts martials are unworkable evidence can't be admitted civil courts because territory rather than right the decision was made closely given as best time for Congress to hold the hearings for embracing the credibility of commissions been tried irrevocably and the legislative process increases public awareness which ensures that the end of the process ensures embrace that backlash to Obama and formal cooperation Congress due to process full of public debate both domestically and internationally process forming legislation in case of political machinations of the prospect legislation encourages broader forms of the legislative public concerned and incorporating public dialogue as functional and fiscal inclusion policy encourages public investment in policy efforts is ultimately embracing the process of conclusion of the process and restrictions are inevitable. It's only a question whether they're deliberate or haphazard wits and nine. The next following towards unpredictable combination nations arrangements to particular questions whether or not institutionalization will take place, whether will it be in place deliberately or haphazardly, and DTC is key to efficiency and fairness. Walsh 11. Fairness must be found for this efficiency way. These elements not inherently zero subject that DTC's employed to maximize efficiency and fairness and greater except the U.S. criminal process is criminally inefficient and extremely costly to the greater significant base. DTC model maintains effectiveness by recognizing the inherent difference between substantive terrorists and advanced terrorist courts. This enhances legitimacy and long-term effectiveness and terror courts are key because it separates powers versus applied congressional authorization void. Separation of powers produced and guarded by military formation of Congress with public detention, charge also affects terrorist investing sole for executive contributions to the process, detention of the fairness of the institution, then incorporating Procedural justice is and then DTC is key treatment of each individual. The influences perception of the U.S. law should level. Fairness and procedures the key elements driving U.S. legitimacy and extending individuals comply with U.S. law such procedural premise provide a framework for addressing specific legitimacy problems that it is critical to expand the procedural judgments beyond individual detainers.
Sure. Terrorism, resentment internally. How does the plan have a unique internally dissolving resentment? Because obviously terrorists don't like being detained, so you still promote detention. Obviously they're going to backlash to that. What amount of resentment do you stop versus what you still generate?
Okay, so obviously we wouldn't change like AQAP, their perceptions of the United States. It solves local populations who perceive that when terrorists are held, they don't get due process, they don't get due process rights, and we just
Sure, yeah. Your evidence goes just as far as local population, so what is the scenario in what country?
That evidence indicates that, like, in countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, if we have better relations with the public, then we can get on-the-ground intelligence about, like, what's going on.
Sure. The next internal link is intelligence. What specifically does the EU have to offer that we would lose out?
So there's testimony that we can get from individuals that they're holding, but they cannot extradite to the U.S. over due process concerns. Just like general intelligence that they have, also, just like extraditing the individuals over means that we can give them a trial and we get more information out of the suspected terrorists themselves.
Sure, like that's one country out of other ones in Europe that we'd be able to offer from, rather than just intel in the U.S.
No, we've read
services.
specific
Your scenario is just the acquisition of a dirty bomb. Like, what do they have to offer that the status quo can't resolve?
Okay,
with
so
just
we've
US
read specific internal links about why, if they get released in Britain and Germany, that they would get access to European, like,
Sure,
safe
your
havens.
piece of evidence indicates that that group, the first line of that is that they want to attack London. Who cares? Like, your scenario is about a U.S. retaliation to an attack. What is a group attacking London?
Not true. The UK is holding terror suspects that we can try, but they cannot release them to the United States, so they release them to the public. That's what the Chris evidence indicates. They would then have access and have the ability to attack inside the UK. We resolve
Right, but I mean, that still presumes then they get the nuke and are able to perform an operation. Credibility. What legitimacy do you increase, like in the context of these two countries? We've been spying on them for years as it comes out now, and invaded both of these countries.
Okay, so the internal link isn't just like credibility, it's basically that Germany and Britain want to cooperate with the United States. The problem is that post-2012 there were new restrictions placed on their governments cooperating with
Right, and as a reason they found out we were spying on people in
that
Europe.
just means that they might like get mad at the United States, not a reason why they would withhold information. They legally
Sure, I think that
information.
sufficiency claim leads to our next thing. Like, where does the internal link distinguish between them getting mad and then breaking the entire
So the
alliance?
Parker evidence literally is talking about how they legally cannot cooperate with the United States because of judicial restrictions about them cooperating with countries who don't give
Your
due
laundry
process.
list impact is about like environmental insecurity, pandemics, resource scarcity. What is the spillover between NATO and being able to resolve
So
like
we read an
violence?
internal link about why Britain and Germany are critical to NATO's military and economic effectiveness. Then that would resolve those impacts. That's the halfway evidence.
Yep.
Good.
Will you, have you been emailing speech up? You can file them? Oh, no, we're not.
Want to see round 4 final?
Yeah, final.
Can I get that when you're all done?
Yeah.
It is 5 off solvency, terror, and credit.
5 off solvency, terror, credibility.
restriction, prohibition, liberal, trauma, the word is different, restriction, the include reporting, and honor, supervised, black, different restriction, the limitation, prohibited from action, content, the supervised, orange tab, oversight, restriction, restriction, very different, the plan offers oversight, is not, it's a review, not prohibition on authority, that's a motivation once a limit, justify, tiny affirmative, that doesn't alter the scope, choosing ground, they all correlate ground, is actually limiting personal authority, C, is decision, only our interpretation defines restriction on authority, that's good, adequate preparation, and policy analysis, the effects, topicality, the plan itself is not a prohibition, makes burden, and causes unpredictable stand, next is war part, this is present, war part, Basel 12, the word of something, increases the criminal right, except the language, only the protecting national security, national cultural law, national security, granting diversity, and the solely, and the side of it, important term, and their discipline, language, only Obama, certain criminal justice, judicial restriction undermines the executive attainment of medical instead, the portion mindful of the unique role of POTUS and the preserving peace of permanent improvement judicial action that undermine the security judicial weapon, the security decision because of the revolution, he's trying to improve the hyper energy executive court, he's very failing and enforcing the U.S. second order cost of the ability of nations, given the heart of the because of the issues of the very proliferation terrorism, also reaches part of the U.S. requires the national security agility, justice of the racing second of the US and POTUS, very much like the institution advantage of the executive enhance of the importance of institutions to speed to flexible court, which are slow, but version of the less punishment of the portion of the declaration of becoming the war, and bolden, rogue saying, demand nuclear war, deep in the same Iran with threat of the potential escalate out of control that they're not managed carefully, no, is I should hire heavily armed terms with things to engage in the territorial distance, such as to have like the rest of the decided what falls and move to felt decided North Korea, plantations from that play comes to make commission, all the men helping some of the great partition with the group military to build up Pyongyang, veterans from the ancient and evidence stability, mutual flow, and dangerous survival, you know, with Iran, and Israel then says the drone that said Obama prioritizing capture over drones now, 2013, bombs over risk of drone and shifting control, a new policy, sharper the control of the ASA, the aircraft companies, Obama now resolving the common concept of the three kill and making the worst of something now, only is trying to close the debate of Obama now doing particularly edge of the definite detention, and detention closure causes the joint use undermines counterterrorism, goals control, and regulation, about detention policy and counterterrorism policy, there are levels of Montreal and the detention to build other options come back on detention result in more dramatic strike with the outsourcing of the detention will be more useful than the capture of the interrogators and they kill them. U.S. will get better information detention, what time more security of terrorism, that's when they could less of the places, and unchecked reuse and cause the great power where hostile escalation without the team. Nation. Following America, lead and development Jerusalem, the 15 of us to let's just go to Jerusalem, Russia, and accident over the international so the country with the Pakistan, North South Korea, Russia, and Baltics, where there's China neighbor of full driven the animal and non-part projecting nation, but the non-nation, control within the range of the North achievement alternative and exit politics. Uniqueness Obama using PC to prevent Iran sanctions now deal with the West Coast and Global continue Obama is president given the video given the region of the Iran to nuclear program the sanction could be nowhere peace and skeptics Obama with reduces with the diplomatic opportunity moving too soon. But again, when the diplomacy brief was part of all of efforts by the administration to the convention several relevant with diplomacy report about the UN nuclear agency that you were having a rapid expansion planning costs and capital as far as future flight trees all with the agenda item 13 or power of the memos from the CIA that detail the intervention technical of the public leader of the relation realize that attempts Obama the foreign policy decision A like Obama from the American military the president of one company and the administration with customer the fight close about time of this with the party of Obama and Greece and deputy detention the ministry not prepared to respond to political attack and PC is key to prevent sanctionship from domestic policies in Yahoo 11.3 significant approximately the 2 minute agreement that is despite customer legislator Obama pushing strong like here's when the time negotiated president has been removed attention B administration has when they was given a piece with the likelihood of the customer foreign policy revelation domestic policy with polarization be alive diplomatic government essentially incentive of Obama to play evidence formulas with the Congress latitude over and sanction cost of Iran proliferation reverse 11.14 and imposing a sanction on the U.S. as a knowledge and negotiation with the peace over Russian dragon her unless pushing with the obtaining weapon of 95% the war of the region remained was the only kind of important sanction of the east of the field of the Russian and continue improvement and which other countries declared resident peaceful Russian and military action decision that Israel is safer and causes nuclear war 8/11 and this is the chance of the repercussion was such a nuclear weapon industry risk when the nuclear army Iran just that again like realize even within convention Iran field Iran big one of the personal security capability of the people finding the comedy terror and the US ability to come in interest of the division further aversion from the when Iran Israel nuclear conflicts emerging will not be person with their capability reason possibly high the ultimate nuclear arms makes this counter plan text the president of the US should issue an executive order committing executive branch to solicitor general representation and advanced consultation with the office of the legal counsel over this issue regarding offering due process habeas claim to resolve legal status of the person detained and an active theater board a Department of Justice the DOJ official involved should the counsel against indefinite detainment without due process executive order should also require the written publication of the office of the legal counsel opinion and executive pre-commitment to DOJ advice on the government of August politics and flexible 5 will give over the people that may make the solicitor general OLC significant counsel on its foreign policy and sort of temporal condition of the measure break the president arching with the principal division of the military detention law and based between the basic Russia and the saving the rules of flexibility of the president third president expected to be when the commitment and based on when the president seems to make the law and they should decide outside of the general advice of the person with the executive prerogative requires the president commitment and executive and say $7 the other person when they give up for the constitution when the president you place situation the president will hold a executive version conflict becoming a self-solvency. President will circumvent the evidence making a line group which holds the procedure protection of the research cultural legitimacy instead of executive use a lesser from the justice and officers from the military commission the company executive and the officers when they were there article 3 from the pulmonary but there any sort of them used by the next person when they rational security should be over in the executive branch of action terrorism. No impact to terror, molecular trauma, no organization, anti-national national, with all idols, just about Islamic extreme violence, not been existential just by the nation that is the main for the countries with some policy and the likelihood of additional level of association, diffuse potential, limited convention of diffuse potential, the label operation of the regional scales, the likelihood I take personal loads for them, and then some of the burden of the announcement of the worst case scenario, unlike the link in the region, the shares of the internals without state partial scenario, government comes to unlike the data internal, no have the light interpret with us movement to full, and no terrorist, okay. Not a recruiting tool, Al-Qaeda doesn't care, making 11 argument the opposite, go talk about recruiting tool, go talk about real mission, as an Al-Qaeda even the mention, go talk about the referencing currently accompanying Al-Qaeda, the recruiters of only a 7 number of all the numerous mission, I is sort of the with no recruiting and no less recruitment on the Al-Qaeda, go talk about close, go talk about the recruiting tool, and plan is also not sufficient because the detention still occurs, which means that takes out internally, NSC is not smart counter-terror policy, 109, Carlos completed the military commission with the litigation doctrine, and the Ukraine assumption, and the separate system of the law, and the which is the negate, the eventual close current doctrine, and the judgment important development, treating of equivalent undermine the suburban society which they see creating, especially when the perpetual errors and detainees offers essential intelligence for the double war and terror, the hard disabling reported the release that duty, they definitely afford the intention of the detainee of Guatemala and the information permanent to the detainee of the permanent intelligence comes to the organization social like kind of person, definitely this is the information permanent which is essentially the exchange and intel sharing is sustainable and right to the cooperation with the world risk there, as a graph of the intelligence of the automated ammunition is a communication broadly which being a main of the benefit of the drone killing, only access Germany and France and we still have a shared intelligence which with the majority of the EU countries which no one cares about London bombing and extremely broad support for intel sharing, Australia 911 increased intelligence cooperation with magazine. And then like lies in relation with the U.S. as the first time inclusion of the deeper intelligence and independent of the policy U.S. EU and American company use with this real threat credit. No spillover to collapse credibility of fighter settlement. Sort of study the only spillovers by people within this there have been used incident of the subject that Iran have been influenced to see there, but they see them in passengers because all three cases of leaders not very influenced by power action crisis. Later, everyone is trying to independent credibility relevant emergent conclusions when they have those video over supporting evidence. And NATO is strong and resilient turbulent war. NATO from the merciless system with the worst attack from the one NATO has been NATO from the amazing system of NATO and its study and the 70 member building NATO organization and so you places the NSA takes out your internal link module of 13 plus spying analysis of the particularly depressing from the widespread anger within the European Union when they overshare you use some of them not personal anytime they resist some of the damage use German and European relation you right to they just been having all allegation unipolarity is not key piece of better hand from I think the rest of the depend on hedgehog and large very good they improve the bill of usage Germany is not requiring cost of argument over to the role the US plays only the commitment to self-publishing control no ownership of no matter the work done by using means civil and uniform maybe equal considered by empirical evidence such as there was a little connection with the actors civil and 19 US content development claim the world to more peaceful and those that the evidence with national leadership conclusion so are not related as and the alliances of resilient and culture 12 alliance aligned with the immersion of remarkable resilience where the passages of NATO show about the culture of Soviet Union involvement in including remember Iceland undertaking military commission when the Iraq war system in relation European worry and Obama puts as intelligence person when those over Europeans when Obama picked up the steel the close to the Western alliance with the weather and if they're wrong in these here and Europe is not key partner anymore so there's 11 with the emergence of our focus on transatlantic relations after China is because of support of US and Brussels and India are going in Russia when we have vital transatlantic customer less meaningful relation no sufficient issue global security there and this is when the US will reach global Europe such excluding climate and geopolitical reach the US and development the US and not even EU, not even disarmament and negotiation driven. The US and Russia, NATO is useless. Other security arrangements of the NATO 13. NATO can only command the purpose of European failing to be maintain capable for the alliance, be relevant alliances decided to operate out of it and make European level give us the obviously need the national military. The consequences of the several military about all European cutting with the military current trends. Are reducing the less contribute the security of the troops when they're coming down sharply focusing the burden sharing. Doesn't get the legitimacy of the lower without no result from alliance and desperate base that's the legitimacy back to the Washington border of the place of the individual just left formal mechanism with reduced political tension. Okay. No terrorist threat comprehensive data from Cyber 13 Akana is a shut fullness of the event of the which Western government have as lead to the political from the loss of political from the EU Taliban that's the global terrorist mission. The national conference and recently ended with a report that attempts to drop the global terrorist index with region like some of the North America most comprehensive they showed in returns of declining most American desire that cause that or kill the terrorists.
Right, so that's the kind of
SCO is always an option.
for you or for the judge?
For the judge.
What's your
Judge can't pick the counterpoint and give the 20 weeks the argument.
Alright, let's talk about the Flexus evidence. Lindquist evidence says judicial review of national security decisions like responding to rapidly changing threats like proliferation, hostile regional powers, trafficking is bad. Why does the plan result in that?
I mean, it's the only question of the changing institutional dynamic in the context of the war part.
Okay. I don't want like an explanation or
sure.
tag. Which part do you think makes the argument that restrictions on detention lead to judicial review of questions of like responding to proliferation?
Well, the Blomquist evidence is so about the overall trend in which court and the
Okay, read your line from it that you think that the best line you think that makes the claim the plan would result in judicial
I mean,
review of like.
I think the entire part is good, but
Alright.
that evidence is
It's
all
not a
about.
question of mechanism, it's a question of process.
Okay,
You choose
why?
a different
Yeah,
agency.
I don't think any
Our
parties
evidence,
are-
our evidence is comparative between the judiciary and the president, since the judiciary is like very rigid,
Why
and
does it-
open, and exposed
Okay,
to like.
there's two parts that I have a question to. One, why is it that judicial review of detention leads to judicial review of like when we have to respond to rapid?
I mean, the plan
threats
also
like COVID?
establishes domestic terror court. Our voluminous evidence is about that changing
It's about
institutional
judiciary.
dynamic between the president and the judiciary,
Alright.
and says any more
Okay.
encroachment by the
You're not
judiciary will
answering my
kill
question.
an ability. We also read
The
into
impact
the
evidence
specific
theory-
internal
that's fine.
mechanisms.
The impact evidence theory talks about the importance of secrecy, speed, and flexibility being important to like offensive force. Why does the plan inhibit secrecy, speed, or flexibility?
Well, it definitely definitely makes it impossible to have any kind of flexible operations because any
Why?
kind of detention authority has to be good.
The president
approved by the-
tomorrow, after the plan is passed, wants to like attack offensively in the Middle East, for example. Why does the plan prevent?
Well, that kind of comes back to the entire question that you've been asking, that you're going to give the same answer. The voluminous evidence about the process in which that occurs, and it's a question of the judiciary.
Let's talk about drones real quick. The Dowd evidence, the impact, is talking about the use of drones being bad. The U.S. use of drones sets a precedent where other countries follow.
Sure.
What's the like link differential between the status quo and the plan? How come these impacts aren't notable?
Our,
Because we use drones now.
well, our uniqueness evidence definitely indicates that Obama is no longer favoring the targeted killing, he's favoring
The
detention.
Dowd evidence, though, is just like use of drones, period.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree that your uniqueness evidence says Obama prioritizes detention over target killing,
Mhm.
but if target killing is
Well,
not
I mean,
stopping
you also make the argument that the drone strikes definitely have been decreasing in the status
Yeah,
quo. That's our
sure,
current evidence,
but
which talks
the
about
Dowd
the
evidence
trend
is just
in
like
which
the
change
use
in passport
of drones,
policies.
period.
Yeah, our evidence indicates other countries follow the model in which we use drones because
Sorry,
we
really
use it
quick, I got like
excessively.
20 seconds left. The Hammond evidence says that Kerry has spent more time than any other U.S. official pushing for Iranian negotiation.
Yes.
So why does the plan result in Kerry not being able to push?
It's not also Kerry, it's also Obama.
The
and
Blake
Kerry.
evidence literally says
You're correct. That evidence indicates Kerry also talked to some members in the Senate, but our evidence also indicates
Kerry is
Obama's
also
role is
most important.
necessary to prevent the other congressional Senate
You,
members
you
from.
come, right?
I don't need any, I'm just saying it. The order is T, solvency, terror, credibility, the counter plan, the Iran dissed, the drone dissed, and then the flex dissed.
Does it count on politics or politics?
Counter plan and politics that are in.
Is that a two-way R ground floor?
Yeah,
Makes it
yeah, I'm
easy.
sorry.
Powerful statement that the two ARs you close with in, the two-way statement.
Well, let's hope they sound similar.
Okay. Can I get that after you?
Everybody good? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Topicality, we mean the definite detention with a right to trial is not a definite detention. The plan causes trials in 7 days. Laws allowed that occur with the 7 days detention must be independently reviewed and arguable to ensure the process paragraph to either join trial or release counter-termination restrictions. Mean the limit or qualification includes conditions on action CA and in the direction area for restrictions and limitation where qualification limit restrictor are similar to the limitation of restriction for new level direct search authorized available. If there is a reasonable way to define the definition to include the absentee to watch community interpretation cause a raise the body counter interpretation is best over the interpretation over limits area restrictions have to one after top year kills innovation for human after which is vital to engage with precision no evidence the context of the top to exclude the
apples arbitrary terms, limits imprecise limits are worse than not at all functional limits and literature guarantee around. Yes, our template was now solvency. He won't circumvent, extend the rugged says that Obama said with the plan, no circumvention president will use, against the Rushkov, and against the private government for the new bench charge against police to reduce the recipe, and taking silent you for that, and action to regain the serious district court determines, the settlement of bench charge will be, to transfer the case against the Congress self-circumvent to the raise of political calamity, and 11, to reverse that action, miscover that studies, correction Congress, these are really important to you, Virginia causes the procedure across the line, things with the first line, guardian plan, or political price, or right, the first member wasn't to that start, good, not go to the terrorism advantage first off, they continue to cause significant against them, that causes escalation, and this procedure can see the internal links, that the informed self extradition, they will be released inside one European safe havens, will cause this, they will escalate hospitals and furnace evidence, also conceded intelligence sharing, the afterwards that it makes it more sustainable, conceded that there are local populations that are resenting this, that's what they say, that there's no impact that to county front doesn't assume releases, and our arguments about data does not assume the extradition during the so also doesn't assume a world in which the African person cooperation with local populations, your evidence about a called a resentment and called a recruitment is not with the Africans about cooperating with populations in which terrorism exists, and make those populations give us vital intelligence, cooperate with our troops on the ground to solve, they say, the NSC is bad national security policy, that's not true, this card concedes the commissions are worse, beats charge after the affirmative also, that says that things like civilian trials are bad, which is not the app now, they say that things are critical to intelligence with the human, however, the government, however, this says we've already gotten the intelligence from the man, the affirmative proves intelligence via trials first cop, and the value of evidence gathered from how to make TVs, this is direct detention clear, and the from the press government, that was criminal intelligence from government, and government can such that human intelligence is comparably better by terrorism over reliance on tactical intelligence from allies skills doll, and seven, single efforts more from running, finding tax intelligence, and scrupulous, small, spreading our relying large information the primary, looking for intelligence, believe the like humans capable of incorporating human data, fighting against her, in fact, more substance the less analysis of intelligence now, they say, intelligence assuring is inevitable, begs the question of with who only going to be destroyed the status quo with Britain and Germany because he can't cooperate with us, and extortion not going to credibility diminish it, there will be a spillover, NATO conceded that Britain and Germany are going to back out, that's the part of they say, NATO is relevant, NATO is still relevant, option, and Germany remains, while you mentioned the alliance played an important role in consolidating democracy in Central Europe, where looked at NATO's hedging against Russia, and the European Union, but we're going to prosperous secure land community, NATO's demonstrated utility of military with the alliance use force, but ethnic conflict in the Balkans, that they say, NSA trade-off order, NSA scandals, no big deal, one hard relations get right covered, and 25 spying over the difference, and you like a unit, you mean to do so not be consequences, there's not the European Union, there's no European sensible declaration of real states, concerned without criticizing no one wants to, and need to cooperate just because chancellors, made a task force, attack the other power was evidence about military budgets in the 90s, the affirmative improves legitimacy, you've conceived the null's evidence that the affirmative makes our hardware more sustainable, which means the Germany decline is inevitable, the affirmative, solves another triple evidence about NATO is too old, and it doesn't assume Britain and Germany backing out the evidence about NATO being useless, also doesn't assume the entire transport line going to hell in a handbasket, can see the Hammond evidence that solves a laundry list of hotspots, as collision now, but the extra counterplan interpretations, the counterplans use different agents of the plan, are legitimate, they do not create critical thinking outside of debate, personal decisions are not made by finding a different agent than ourselves, no literature confirms that discussions are only valuable, if they are informing for information, promotes abdication and responsibility, they teach the average Winston and Nelson would act instead of how to persuade someone to vote for fairness, education, permutation of both, and permutation, the counterplan, the net benefit of circumvention posture, and LC told Obama, they the president disregarded the advice of any elite, and absolutely from the LC, all the presidents, legal advice, or restrictions, block the president, and he will disregard the advice and march like these LCs to represent the LC, he does, not train these guys have been able to complicate, he would get otherwise able to accomplish permutation, and you have written your counterplan text right, does not actually create a national security court, just as you consult the LC, over due process and hate violations, you drop all of our Welsh evidence, and terrorism evidence says that a trial process is critical to bring allies on board, otherwise in the status quo, they will just give the due process and run for a military commission, which screws our reliance to extend the Sullivan only evidence, only congressional action solved, and it starts the public to carry the counterplan cause circumvention and more detention happen as well. The executive incentive overtain, so the first attack like later on the side detention of the individuals not detained, earnestly, release police cost harm bureau being placed cost from piece of political work south of the executive institution parties, authority risk covering, the accused of political backlash and extend the Chesney evidence selected state actions key to international legally seen as the most meaningful, presidential actions, and they stronger still allows extend the Welsh evidence plan, promote separation of powers, which is the only way to bring the executive dominate the process. That's also the free sale evidence and Congress will backlash to the counterplan by holding up tests that links to no reason why it doesn't link to politics. Obama still does, see, social checks also links to war fighting because Obama would still do it now. Your argument on the counterplan about why it doesn't link to war fighting is nonsense because Obama still proceeds with checking out an internal process destroys legitimacy, erosion 13 so if the evidence is carefully reviewed and whatever the press need, not usually probably the person requires a person to trust the government and that's your early test even the executive incentive government side which really trust the person review involved. The course market courts now go to the Iran said no Iran proliferation security estimates overblown high ends to 18 years relative official downgraded since Iran's ability to be willing to go bomb it while Iran not having still 26 no Israel and Islam to run proliferation for Iran's nuclear program has from mistaken technical choices in port, and multi schools have the name class of brands, so these nuclear programs market of progress and carry is pushing at LA Times, 1300 rate that say what is the weather the most economic sanctions are right enough carry with the life of the penalties will negotiate to carry so long as need to be passed out and hold up on action over votes Vader amendment every look 14 of them like the read the wrong and says that you receive that going to go on term and looks like likely to have been on mission from the delay until December votes and the deal will fail international foil CNN American allies not agreeing to revolution France against House deal runs protesting vocally go for allies or protesting vocally and get most and get most already being debated Worthington 14 ever support Obama hosts Obama's close from Howard his face off from Thomas Long supposed restrictions preventing more person from being able to raise the evolving of the serious and fair market where we believe German local football on the planet is popular with the GP McLaughlin and Paul says well we seem more ordinary votes in the GP parties of pushing acting against everything but one of the should die one years ago prevent called death for something you mean and no residents suggest right to arbitrary and irreparable order no residents who destruction however we should stand all the climate does not know good yeah drone Obama's speech Rogan, he's already called for the claim he's a destinable Congress has already passed the tension restriction pounds of disadvantage law Alexander and Congress passed legislation requiring a colleague to be held in military to make a deal with the prosecuting the federal court DDC so he is short authority to student began the executive search and his whole executive power act and it versus the power to counter executive decision or remaining lottery policies no drone ship the numbers don't line up Chesney and love it truly and destroy Secretary of Obama's favor to killing me numbers you court of record what is it to look at how much the zero strike has been cut for policy since again whether Georgia can you vaccine permission vaccine or Miller was corrupt dramatic now that Georgia left about attention to her is hard to carry remote the impulse said with her is feasible option for capture could be using other drones or detention we're relying on multi just surveillance about the detention versus target but something more difficult to measure the affirmative is not in it does not in detention it's just in definite detention no link differential within their evidence and road trip is locked in left its hand computers been dramatic shift in detention to drone strikes the administration using the subject for capture detention intelligence gathering the big health the need for Congress to refocus on developing an in the whole policy for detention of foreign policy combatants now go to the power of press powers that said they cannot solve the affirmative extradition is critical for European safety and cooperation is critical and as for first fails Guantanamo closure and intelligence to military commissions inevitable triggers the link after only 6 years convictions that's a primary and the evidence of legitimacy to solve the impact obviously need for flexibility by de-escalating crisis before they begin Schwartz and Heaven and today's battle against terrorist orientation matters related to the military edge and the U.S. cannot continue to need cooperation for all the 7th means the only government saying that institutes the military mind and has to just continue to national security policies about the law expected and the executive discretion of law and filling the fall of democracy and the elites are allies comparatively that is more important Waxman and a 25 stronger and executive checks on the use of first order strategy by making them more credible U.S. rights firmly ruled by Congress that are legally perfectly important maybe rights credibility the president's commercial role and uncertainty among those who be dependent on the U.S. maintains the world order encourage detention legislation on rights flexibility that's the Alexander Evans I read on the last dissent and the affirmative doesn't we result in judicial deference power and 6 the practice standpoints of more the executive branch establishes the firm judicial Congress for determining the heat the latter would be better would be for the executive the forcible for the executive action the way for the executive for control of the he's pretty full and for the president for judiciary to the executive with looking at executive war temperature federal court jurisdiction over DKs not going to hinder and executive war in turn for the DK repeal possible return if possible as best possible government and this nation seeks to try the right balance between executive board charges and judicial right to review and links talking about judicial review of security of course the app is not that and the Al McCullough decision and the movement decision should be triggered and Syria restrictions should be triggered like Obama asked which is a political restriction Waxman and I think because of politically trying to what he's going to continue through awards and actions during up some of the rates come from his current to the drive apart from his institutional reason to take things difficult for the president market a president and it's a good thing the affirmative in NATO solves the defense of land cohesion is critical to solve hotspot escalation Brzezinski and I'm NATO combines but if you will do this with Europe's political idea one of the months over rain that's the important state from the geopolitical body address in Newcastle there is an effective with secure mechanism coping the growing threat of God local chaos. Apologies?
Yeah,
okay. The applicant is McCain on board. He sees it as a specific plan. Hunt 728 McCain. Total one fields promise closing heating temperature. So he says, "Local condition much every refer use to the similar to announce plan market plan. McCain is keeping John Hunt 728 on McCain. He watched most and more alliance and regular McCain is most political in the Senate. He's often more than the party leaders."
I'll mark both of those before we start process.
Okay.
Only theoretical violation is the agent counterplan. Was there any conditionality?
There was not, just the agent counterplan.
Okay, perfect. I have a question about the. You didn't read the climate evidence, did you? You just read the.
Did not read the climate evidence.
Okay, just making sure. Question about the plain popular evidence. This evidence cites Rand Paul who say that we should go against the indefinite detention power. What does that say anything about the current congressional climate about indefinite detention?
It's not about, well, it is because Rand Paul's in Congress, but it's also about him calling on the GOP to soften its stance on indefinite detention to appeal to a broader range of voters, which
why is that relevant to anything about the senator opposition to sanctions?
Sorry, about the
Why
Senate's
does-
opposition to sanctions?
Your
Because
big
we read a
problem
piece
is
of evidence from
about
a
just
senator
to bring
that
more
says that
younger
indefinite
voters
detention
into
is
the
false.
party. Why does that affect anything about the congressional negotiation that's happening now?
It proves that the act would not take any political capital to pass.
Okay. The warning for evidence, this evidence says that Gitmo independently thumbs any indication in this card which indicates that Gitmo debate is happening now. This evidence is just about Obama tried to push it, there was opposition, so Congress put a restriction. Doesn't say when it happened, how it
Sorry,
happened.
which piece of evidence are
The
you talking
Worthington
about?
evidence that says Gitmo thumbs to this side. This
Yeah.
evidence says that the pushing for ending of indefinite detention faced opposition from Congress, so that's why the Congress put a restriction in the first
Yeah,
place.
except they're debating it when the 2014 National Defense Authorization Act comes out for a vote in like a week. Guantanamo is bundled up in that debate. We can read more evidence if you like, but I mean,
Any piece
that's
of evidence
the-
that we see that makes that claim?
yes, that argument says that Guantanamo debate is happening now.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about the
I
defense
can,
authority.
I can, I
Defense
can, I
authorization.
can read the card. I'm quite sure that that's what it's talking about.
Ever since Obama promised to close
Well,
Guantanamo,
Guantanamo
it
faced
faced
opposition from
opposition
Congress.
from Congress. Lawmakers imposed
Impose
restrictions.
restrictions of increasing severity designed to keep Guantanamo open to prevent prisoners from being released, resolve hysteria, cynical fear-mongers, political football.
Sure, nothing about the
The
defense
title of the article
authorization.
is Will Carl Levine's Amendments to the NDAA Help President Obama Close Guantanamo?
Where are you getting
So,
that
I just read you the title of the article. It's in the context of the NDAA debate.
That's fine. The deal fails evidence just indicates there's some backlash from allies. Do you have any kind of evidence that it's obviously a sufficiency claim that says that backlash is sufficient to wipe out any negotiation with Iran?
The card is quite good. It says three
No,
countries.
it only says,
It
like,
says-
cites like 3 countries who say they don't like what Obama's doing.
Yeah, exactly. That proves that the deal will not go through. It's not just a
Okay,
question of the
I don't know
US.
why that takes, well, first of all, our impact is based on Iran not pursuing nuclear weapon post-diplomatic effort.
Right,
Why is those other
right,
countries
because if
relevant?
nobody else supports the sanctions, obviously they either won't be effective or they
Sure.
won't happen.
The Everett evidence, the no Iran vote, I really don't get what you try to do with this card. This evidence just talks about the Vitter, Senator Vitter and the healthcare vote.
It says that it will have the unintended consequence of delaying until December
Obamacare
votes on the
amendment.
authorization bill. This includes amendments to impose harsher sanctions on Iran.
Okay, so your argument is that the only way the sanctions will happen is through.
Our argument is that the Vitter amendment delays the vote until December.
Sure.
The act happens and it's not proceed. Yeah, I could do that. can just send them the Dropbox too.
That works. War powers, drones, counterplan, topicality, solvency, terror, cred.
Sorry, war power DA, drone DA,
Counterplan,
counterplan,
T,
T.
solvency, terror, and cred. Did you end up getting it?
Oh, wait, hold on. There you go.
Flexibility is that going forward, we'll concede no link to Syria, would be able to fund the DISA drones, DISA we concede that the drone shift is already happening, the status quo treated to be a massive all-cost to terrorist recruitment in relations that we have throughout the EU with massive policing of drones and massive killing of terrorists that is inevitable in continuing in the status quo counterplan debate. Counterplan, we're not going for permutation to test a competition. You have not contested the conditionality, which means this agent argument is reason to reject the argument. Not the team, this counterplan is one on an agent counterplan because it uses different mechanisms than what the plan is, but also is key to education. It is one of the three agents in the core literature debate on this topic, and is key to negative ground to be able to test small literature bias, permanence, and competition should be the validity of which you test the abuse of this counterplan for your effectively tested the competition by the plan. It's the reason why this counterplan should be introduced to debate. The alternative is arbitrary. This topic, how to debate our interpretation is restrictions must be prohibitions on the ability of the president, the discretion to enact his authority in the context of indefinite detention. I think this should be very telling on the dissent when they say we don't link to any detention-based dissents because we only affect the temporality of indefinite of the ability for us to continue to detain. This is a core distinction to be able to resolve any bidirectionality on the topic. We should have a core yes, no, you banning the detention and having a core debate on between that literature base rather than you having some small restriction that you would be able to claim a bidirectional interpretation of whether either side of the topic is restrictions on authority or distinct from conditions. Answer their counter-interpretation comments that they properly interpret conditions opposed to the plaintiff's restrictions limitations upon the authority, but rather conditions preceding granting of the authority. There must be a clear bright line. Restrictions require a floor and a ceiling. Oversight is a floor, but doesn't set a cap on what the president's potential actions can be. USDA in 7 the district courts properly found that they led to stop produce a restriction that policy must be self-contrary. Subcontracting sets a floor and sets a floor about a ceiling. The plan is the opposite. It gives the president more authority to detain Fisher. In 9 new courts that institutionalized worst features of the Bush administration perpetuating indefinite detention and trial outside the federal courts. National security courts call for increased authority. Fit in 9 Obama decided not to seek legislation to establish new system of detention will rely on authorizing military forces to expand government powers. Detention powers as currently accepted or adequate, but new detention authority with legislation would make this bad situation with national security court administration weighs the possibility of the administration not asking, seeking, but it would be able to we would be seeking additional hurdles. Our first impact is the limit. The first impact is limits claims laws acts like consultation, weak reviews that don't actually constrain but just supervise the president, which explodes the mechanisms to would be able to have precise limits or key penalty in 13 the term restrictions defined broadly versus the number of conflicts regulations is not comported with the meaning of not all interchangeable language of legal uses. We cannot have appropriate actions for restrictions. It obliterates the subtleties when usefulness in law and second is bidirectionality. As largely articulated above, absent any prohibition, they can create conditions that can functionally increase the ability of his authority rather than have a clear debated rather than have a clearly debated topic. And third is ground towards the heart of the topic, like presidential power, good and bad debates, and the drone shift is in the context of New York, in the context of detention. They score the quarterly ground excuse the debate in favor of the affirmative class effects, which is entirely conceded. Oversight is not in and of itself a restriction. It leads to maybe a trial process that is in and of itself restrictions, a possible condition which creates depth. Topic out of mixes burden caution to look at solvency before you evaluate. You only look at the plan in a vacuum creates an is able to create an unpredictable and prefer competing in interpretations. The most objective state of reasonability is tautological and arbitrary. The ultimate goal of our interpretation is proof they are not a reasonable limit on the topic. Anyway, solvency debate, the plan gets circumvented. We have the most contextual evidence in the context of the NC and SC that indicates the Obama would use military commissions or something else because he does not have to be responsible for. The NSC would circumvent it. Your piece of 2AC evidence, ununderlined portions, indicates the AG has the power to do it, which guess who controls him? Obama. So it's the question of the executive has the ability to enforce the NSC. He won't do it. We've read the contextual evidence that concludes the Sadius question is the most definitive. Peace courts will allow deference. Davis and 7. The NSC will have courts of business based on state, secret, officer, union, political question where they held detention topic of possibility for industry with the new courts have absolute no interest once the national security courts in the context of courts not want to hear even Article 3 courts can't solve delays. Bureau 9. The trials will take additional substantive period of time. Unnecessary prolonging detention period while logistical not for potential trials. We're talking about thousands. Article 3 courts will love less effective preserving rights and protections. Article 3 courts and all the law compromises at least take national security to finally defend its constitutional rights. The terrorism scenario you have no terminal impact. It is an existential. Our evidence indicates it is a manageable status quo risk that counterterrorism in this quo is effective and able to solve because Al Qaeda is so organizationally weak that they are not able to capably detonate attack, and if it is, it's not WD, and it's a conventional based attack because that's what you have the motive for and the large and more probable capability to be able to enact data is on our side and indicates Al-Qaeda. So we destroy the didn't have the capability to acquiesce and organize a large-scale attack, oil dependence, make sure impact inevitable, send line, oil penetrant terrorists, present the U.S. role in Persian Gulf and the powerful, resentment of Persian cause that have resentment goes from the U.S. relationship with Saud to protect the oil plus policy makers still compelled to maintain the relationship which the power of the region likely to fuel jihadist movements, ability to oil revenues work their way through the informal system of Islamic charities, and 2, terrorist groups don't assume the worst case scenario. Terrorists have many opportunities to fail, levy and aid the defense is driven by worst case scenario driven by terrorists have superhuman power. Terrorist groups are limited to religious groups have a lack of expert personnel. Terrorist groups make a mistake. The group will be killed on part of the war when next to see the hide it, the terrorist groups conservative failure to have to stick to the bread and butter tactics, which is possible. The first internally is resentment. Obviously, it's logical to say things like drone strikes continuing and the status quo continuing to detain them means that resentment from groups is inevitable and recruitment would be inevitable. Recruitment will still happen, and the status quo the plan is insufficient to be able to resolve this claim. We've read specific piece of evidence in the context of the NAC that indicates it maintains the detention policy, which sparks the massive resistance internationally, which means your plan is able to solve massive all causes. Just in the 10 of the 30 or message interviews Al-Qaeda members watch on mention only 3 messages, even the Al-Qaeda mentions the non-Thomas which are following more position in Israel. Also, Al-Qaeda and Pakistan this message. Al-Qaeda are more interested in these other detentions, even local populations resentments. That's what else 13 some more of our critics shows that aid terrorists recruiting those who worry about it. There's a couple of years where thousands of reasons for anti-Americanism threats reached. There's been no strikes which have been active anti-Americanism predated. Anti-Americanism predated relevant. The next argument is intelligence. Sharing arguments indicates it's inevitable, and even if we do not have it directly through the EU, we will be able to circumvent their intelligence from another terrorist group. There's no unique intelligence or unique group that we need them to receive from to be able to stop status quo counter-terror operations. There are already effective allies when abandoned Bolton love with the application of Europe by the measures of the leaders want to work about credibility and likely to ban by the possibility that allies when abandoned are always exaggerated given our geopolitical position would likely have things about violence skepticism may have every incentive to work little incentive to do cooperations. Neville Mueller and 12 bin Laden succeeded in the United War against jihad no matter how they might affect other issues of compelling incentive for jihad cooperate with you terrorist efforts by Muslims who have received a public deep for 55 countries quickly driven by important breakthroughs. This willingness has been amplified by the need to have subsequent activity and subsequent activity in their own regions. Extradition, you cannot tell what a particular country is or what terrorist we need or the intelligence or what attack that's trying to be committed. All the defensive of sufficient to take out the internal into that question. Credibility, no spillover evidence indicates empirics on our side that one crisis escalation does not transfer our credibility to one area, does not spill over. Uniquely, you cannot spill over to broader environmental policies in the context of NATO from military. This makes absolutely no sense. NATO is strong. Evidence indicates they're expanding and have up-and-coming missions that they already have. That's what means uniqueness. That's what's resolving this question. NSA takes up your term evidence indicates the allies of West Japan and EU have backed it. Allies your term evidence indicates it already overshadowed the EU summit, and on top of Snowden, this is a very big highlighted issue. Jockey in the 11.5 can think of your friends, hence much more friends, more powerful, appropriate, did not have any stopping the transition free zone, which you see the make more profitable than you should terminate the immense relationship with the BND, the rest of the have NSA, the top of the rest of homegrown green 2007 governments was in good translation of Operation Office. NSA has done more transatlantic relations and Al-Qaeda's operative could dream of the national security courts are more restricted than status quo sins and illegitimate signal build names of terror volume with the worst the new current process served in the judicial system fair trial, which means circumvented, which we have police and defendants and challenging procedures. National security already exists forever. The resist why Algebra prosecutors have altered so often it's hardly imagine seriously considering it's hard to imagine them seriously considering such and option no internally to collapse of NATO. You cannot have it internally between disliking a particular policy and spilling over to entirely not working together and future military policies common question terrorism before the plan cooperation survive the divide internal strengths. NATO will serve in part function. NATO will have a vehicle for U.S. influence in European continents. Also nurture NATO have flexibility in military bureaucracy which teaches us large institutions how die easily or this group because understanding to American Europeans have much more in common. It's much more reason for NATO is to be able to remain the same allies that were zone evidence indicates they were able to side the Soviets, Iraq, and Obama, which they perceived as anti-European, which means they were able to sustain it in the status quo. The EU is no longer a key part of it. Indicates China's to be dependent more economically. There was a recent global warming negotiation that we were able to resolve entirely without them. There is no reason they are key to global cooperation on any transnational threats. NATO is not key anymore. Evidence indicates because the EU is massively cutting their military budget. They have massively less troops. They're not able to maintain a global military focus to be able to resolve the global military focus to be able to resolve international threats. There's no terminal impact to hegemony. Evidence indicates it doesn't solve war empirical data. As hegemonic stability theory is no empirical basis. 90 military spending in the world for more peaceful. It overestimates or exaggerates the role of the U.S. is only way to be self-sustaining. Throw over normative shifts starting curve without no effect. There's no correlation between this and global stability. That's why sometimes the only data we have regarding relation more pushing U.S. has more peaceful transatlantic military spending. The rest of the world cannot operate military act global policemen and the other explanations do more consider institutional activists America not America for more trained war and still effective calculations global position with the U.S. peacemakers and have normative multi-directional restraint which have the world would be risk-free.
so what about defense spending being cut, according to your FATWISE evidence, implicates the United States' ability to be legitimate and conform to international law?
Sure. The FATWISE evidence indicates we cut defense spending in the 90s and no wars happened. So
yes, it says we cut spending in the 90s and majestically nobody went to war. How does this evidence assume anything to do with the current climate of Britain and Germany threatening to back out of NATO because we don't have a good trial policy?
I mean, we have specific NATO answers. I can talk about that. That's to a general hegemonic deployment scenario. In the context of NATO, we say that they have massively decreased troops. They're decreasing their military budgets, which means they cannot globally expand where we would need them to operate.
Fantastic. The topicality argument. I want to deal with this temporality distinction that you seem to make. Just for clarification's sake, the resolution says indefinite detention, right?
Those are words, yeah.
Okay, so top of the last do not have to end all of our detention authority, right? Just our authority to indefinitely detain.
The interpretation is it has to eliminate the president's discretion, which means he should no longer be able to detain.
To indefinitely detain, right? Because that's an important distinction. Okay, so atop the left, in a world post-top the left, the president could still imprison people, right?
No. Well, that's my interpretation. That there needs to be a clear, non-bidirectional topic that the plan allows detention good as offense.
Okay, so what's the topical version of the act? Is the topical version of the act to ban all detention?
In the context of targeted killing, something like banning.
No. How about in the context of detention?
Banning the use of detention.
I
think ban acts are the most logistical statement.
Okay,
because
so
any other alternative is bidirectional.
Cool. So you allow 4 Fs on the topic, is that correct?
Yeah, I think they're damn good acts.
4 Fs. Okay, your Fisher evidence.
Two-sided literature.
Your Fisher evidence, which says that we cause the aft to become bidirectional. I'm sorry, it's sort of freezing out. It makes a distinction between the president's ability to detain. Oh, here we go. Fisher evidence. New courts would institutionalize the worst features of Bush administration policies, perpetuating both indefinite detention and trial of terrorism suspects outside the federal courts. The aft's a trial outside the federal courts. Wouldn't that end the president's ability to indefinitely detain?
And the part before that says it maintains indefinite detention. The Finn evidence indicates that it institutionalizes indefinite detention, the piece of evidence after that, because it expands the government power, because the NSC is essentially a military.
Is it true that your Finn evidence doesn't even talk about a national security court and just talks about, quote, new detention authority legislation?
That piece of evidence is in the National Security Division in the underlined parts of the articles and indictment of the National Security Court that Obama proposed.
Okay, the only claim that this card makes about a National Security Court is National Security Court administration waived the possibility. The administration is not currently seeking additional authorization.
This is indicting Obama's attempt to push it in 2008, and they said you shouldn't do it because it expands its governmental authority to indefinitely detain.
That's not even a sentence. Your card is not even making a coherent claim about what a national security.
There are actually multiple sentences that indicates he weighed the possibility, and that he would currently be seeking additional authorization of force if that was granted. So thus it would be an increase in authority rather than a restriction.
Sure. You have any more questions? Okay, what about the app as a condition? Your counter evidence says
your 2AC interpretation is a limit.
Oh yeah, sure.
Let's say we can drop off. Yeah. Just a 1 hour round.
Did you say it's just politics?
Yeah, 1 hour. Oh, the speech doc is called 1 hour.
No, I meant the order is just politics.
Yeah. And there's an impact overview at the top.
Wait, actually, this isn't in here. Did you?
We should just say 1 hour.
No, I don't think so. Because the most recent was the fancy.
Okay.
proliferation causes widespread counter-proliferation with it Middle East cause massive miscalculation to nuclear conflict independently. Israel will first strike Iran in a preemptive strike that causes quick escalation to global conflict, causes extension of the edible evidence or negative on the time frame, deal successful now, but war will escalate quickly if the talks fail down. In 1114, Iran and rapid expansion of the revenue arrangement causes to lay off any intent of the Brock, the word and reverse from the strength of Tehran's hand. In negotiation of the amount of the agreement, which is the concept of the agreement, the engagement of the amount of the economy, red line to military action. In choose always some probability their impacts or terrorism, NATO, US alliance with a longer list of the impact, which all have been going on for decades. Middle Eastern proliferation is more probable is on one region that has a cascading rapid proliferation will actually occur. It's a new geopolitical tension. They also have a scenario where alliance collapse which prepare our specific scenario conflict is uniquely like 11, 11, 14, 19, that's what the problem worse than military action and also different nuclear strike in Iran. Yes, proliferation are one is internal like this indicates Iran will quickly acquire capability of framing issue. We don't need to win. The proliferation actually occurs because of the collapse of negotiation causes the Israeli and US fear causes the intervention within the Middle East causes it escalate. Even if the Iran feels the pursuing capability independently is sufficient to drive regional proliferation, most qualified and reinforced the proliferation possible is Atlant. Regional proliferation accelerate Saudi with the proliferation accelerate Iran starting with the husband and Iran using terms of the country respond. You determine this military Iran for the Saudi country system with the relative of Pakistan and the Pakistan will welcome the Pakistan by order. Extend the determine the situation of the weapon would have been usually sent by order person with the weapon the interaction with the nuclear power with the pro-team miscalculation and escalation stop escalation. Even if the bomb is not built, it still causes military action point 13. Now as you know their term the letters from the uranium enrichment agent remaining short of the PC reaction nuclear and nuclear Iran using the vessel the deal possibility. Sort of using military regional power to with the jelly Iran enriching the isolate Israel. All of their evidence also assume the previous proliferation are in this collapse of negotiation causes the emboldening the hardliners within the region that's going to put their nuclear that's going to put their nuclear program on the overdrive, which causes the future proliferation. They're carrying key evidence as an RPC argument. Obama needs to make sure they talk to other administration officials so that he can mobilize them to persuade them. Remember, concede the PC key evidence from the one that indicates that congressional saber rattling now. Obama's the only one who can bring diverse constitution on board, and the PC determines the direction of the sanction. Copyright 1111 has some of the vision, like some of the political will is still there, but we'll kind of like get up from that so much, which how much political Obama's willing to submit a possible deal, like and continual pushes critical to sustain coalition direction in 1116. It is also decoupled from the Reagan close to rather addition negotiable long low from the initial lobbying the White House reaching for the beers. They don't like they're optimistic. They say no vote, but their defense authorization is not the only way that sanction could be attached. They could still come up with independent legislation before the next week, right before that we go into the Geneva Constitution. Veto vote does not check anything. All of our PC evidence proves that they say deal fail. But your evidence only highlight like 3 groups who might not like what Obama's doing. No sufficient claim as to why that collapses the entire negotiation. And the deal is possible while 13 changeable progress on the first of the building conversation from the conference deal opponent or again outside of the Obama hearing that the Obama adversary Nintendo Saudi Israel like the winnable fight or Obama charge of the public support starting with the administration of the privilege probably with the official and the journal P5.1 day where based on the data turned open the 19 months directly for the over murder weapon used to give again breakthrough about sanctions kill like copper 11 for the edition from the international process already made observation of the diplomacy move and the accession of the top of the section already affected the drawdown to the people the US and UNS geometric was 95% section of the movement after the event of the additional sanction and one of the hardliners with the bulk of the diplomatic and negotiation they say Gitmo now, but their evidence is not saying anything about Gitmo to be happening now. And worse, it's about the NDA legislation that comes in December, which does not take us sanctions to be Iran sanctions or top of the Dr. Sherman. In the message election Senate, but home defense is different operation. So that target sections around the idea linked to be a uniqueness was conceded, which may only risk that they killed the debate group. The one evidence indicates there's overwhelming opposition to the plan. Hardline GOP first transfer report makes it all feel like we're vulnerable, pushing through it, and it's disasters. Where Obama mentioned the European evidences about the Tea Party who are not relevant to the current congressional opinion, and apparently the plan caused a massive backlash. Hence, in 12 of the group the attention becomes known public being. And then there's some of the worst necessarily caused a domestic political backlash over the some of the determined the Congress of further such transfer. And plan is not popular. The people don't want to detain to rob the U.S. person high level of Obama promised that he would close. While talking about the other side of the policy, the relation of the relative prosecuting federal political heavily several other, including the public office related to the U.S. They have the permanent administrative of the coalition, but on the bipartisan opposition now, Cosman 13, same bipartisan from the Congress and investment close but on the right political result of the audience of the investigation Cosman and Christmas Day 2009 and inadequate preparation by the administration used plan independently strips Obama authority that causes losers to lose limits 7, declining political authority, increases defensive political and observation perception, whatever they deliver overall defensive reign, killing just lobby countries are still beating. Because of the loser failure because of the floating out of the devastating for the time double for the encapsulation of the political failure, which gives the repercussion perception of the capacity they say maintain, but maintain is already on board spike to 1114. Making of the rate is not helpful and enacting additional section. All the senators are already on board every 13. Senator Mexico divided Obama will make the assistant and Senate needs to stop at the Johnson will defer to White House when the very no sure remains undecided probably the Obama administration has the top gun group to the group senators around I'm just planning to answer their length numbers of the audit said first their rising evidence for the 186 just from May obviously does not take out the Obama current peace and push for Iranian diplomacy and here's to prove that there's no domestic terror now with peace the only claim causes a new fight that derails Obama agenda. I like to know evidence on the other does not take out because of the previous legislation and go back to proliferation debate. Proliferation caused the Middle East where multiple reasons cause 13 each of the proliferation of the acceleration of the mid-coast middle of Iran is persecution made by this which can also result in the alliances is likely about cause and confrontation of the compound of people in such a block competition conflict issue makes similar to the effect of the main competition between each sort of those system of the country as version consequence of the proliferation is that increases chance of the conflict process of relation upon one another could be destabilizing the environment of control of technology and reach the heart of the original issue particularly escalation of global competition.
P, relevancy, terrorism, credibility, politics. When he was speaking out of the drone BA, he did that like all cause drones argument that'll be on cred.
Okay.
Anyone not ready?
We meet their interpretation of intentions without trial. Welsh indicates that we cause trials within 7 days. Our counter-interpretation limit the action of the President CIA having solved all their offensive continue over limits is that true. Their interpretation destroys after affirmative ground cross-examination proves that 4 apps, but they're all banned apps, literally makes use of force apps impossible because there's no solvency evidence that says we should ban all the introduction of use of force. Second is that we would always lose the flexibility this had to destroy the top and background. Now the flight line they say we don't link out their detention DAs, which means that we're bi-directional. The topic is not a detention topic, it's an authority topic. We still limit the authority of the president, which means that we don't delete to bi-directional. We won't be bi-directional if we increase authority. Also, indefinite detention is not the same as detention, which means that even if detention occurs after the plan is not indefinite, they flow facility, and the argument of the plan that increases authority, they conceded the portion of the plan text that says that we exclusively give jurisdiction to the NSC, which means that we create that ceiling. Also, the plan doesn't increase authority because that authority would be given to exclusively to the new court that is created. Doesn't increase the executive authority. They say limits, however, they concede the argument that functional limits able to solve back for their arguments. Other words, the resolution solve back for their consultation example. Also, solvency evidence in literature means that there's no use here. They say we oversight is not a restriction. However, we're not an oversight app. The plan gives exclusive jurisdiction to new NSC. Reasonability. First is that there's no interaction. Second is that competing interpretation leads to a race to a bottom. Also, leads to arbitrary debates and justice counter-interpretation only are topical. Also, the plaintiff's interpretation on indefinite detention without trial. Store card U.S. Legal 13 definitions practice saving. U.S. person without trial indefinite detention stays here. And in most cases, suspected terrorists who are indefinitely detained now. The solvency debate, there's no circumvention. The Rogan Anthony case bombs down with close intention plus, which means there's Obama wouldn't actually circumvent to be in future presidents. There's no impact that they also the Chicago indicates specifically the NSC wouldn't be able to be circumvented because they hold by the president liable as well as the sovereign indicates that Congress increases political checks on the executive. Which increases political costs of circumvention, which means there being no circumvention. They're arguing about courts not solving their evidences about Article 3 courts, which is something that we inside coming out of 1AC, and then C is able to solve it now. The terrorism advantage group, their impact defense versus we post 8% 30 evidence case or 17 case IEA reported nuclear plutonium being stolen. The status will increase the threat of a second is that their evidence does not assume the scenario of our impact evidence indicates that European safe havens because of extradited individuals being released in Europe that leads to access to loose nukes. Their evidence is all about terrorists not getting access to the running around. In the Middle East, obviously, they don't have access to, which is not our internal link to that. Third is that even if the attack is unsuccessful or asymmetric in case I causes unwanted escalation in China and Russia because we retaliate, they say ultimate causes oil dependency. First is that this just leads to more resentment. We still solve the internal link. There's also no impact to this argument. These points that we still have conceding for links through intel sharing extradition, which we're conceding coming out blocked, and I shouldn't have to allow link explanation here now. They say allies won't abandon the cooperations in level. However, we post a indicates that 2012 restrictions placed on the specific allies like Germany and Britain that they can't extradite individuals over the United States specifically about extradition. They say no specific scenario. We've read evidence about by testimony, intel sharing, and extradition able to solve for a greater and solves the terminal impact to There, now the credibility advantage, the alliance here, they're also going to cause about drones, NATO likes drones right now. In time to NATO, the wants to EU countries, my drones will lead the European nations. Two more match America's commitment to help rebalance NATO would like to see European alliances plank their part and acquire more drones. To improve their surveillance, they say there's no solar air routine and Keller indicates Britain and Germany are critical to revitalize NATO, which solves their escalation arguments. Also, they say NSA scandal leads to a reverse. Our extended right evidence indicates that it says that relations, it says that it didn't crack down because there's lack of EU unity on the issue. Also, Merkel didn't prioritize seconds. It's not relations or credibility of specific evidence about Britain, Germany, extradition, cooperation. They say NSC leads to more, at least more. leads to more restrictions as the Grady evidence versus there's no impact to this argument. Second is that the plan still provides due process, which should be able to solve our internal links. They say allies are resilient. This is still answered back by Park evidence post-states and says that they won't cooperate with but they see no impact to Germany. Fedwise is talking about defense funding states who looks about the hyper-specific nature of NATO military engagement and economic military engagement solves global conflict. Now, what?
Hotspots.
Which solves hotspot escalation, has multiple internal impacts to warming disease and erosive proliferation of the politics. They say at the top they say Iran and establishment of global conflict. They concede on the flexibility to eventually add on. You read about Brzezinski says that we solve hotspot escalation, which means there's no impact to Middle East conflict. They say time frame evidence is about a deal, not the terminal impact. They say Iranian proliferation is a possible center, having 7 syndrome, and answer the warranting. It says that their estimates are overblown, fear monger. And assume worst case scenarios that Israel is also giving flawed intelligence. Our evidence indicates that there's a mistake in Iranian technology, which means they can't proliferate now. They say they lead to military action if we don't have a deal. However, there's no impact to this. Second is that it says that we could lead to military action, not that we would. Also, Syria proves that we wouldn't actually lead to military intervention. They say they don't answer our carry argument. The allies indicates that Kerry's pushing. Kerry's key to pushing, which is also what their internal link evidence indicates. He has more influence than anyone else, including Obama, which means there's no reason Obama is key to uniqueness made. Our evidence indicates that they don't have to vote Obamacare. Votes straight off. Also, there's a delay on Iran until next year, which means they can't solve CNN evidence indicates a deal will fail. And they can't solve. They say Iran's top is document. However, give them thumbs say Kaplan in 11, 12. Those are just a few things we can see. I've issued actually scratch that. There's Farmhouse comes first, Rogers, and testified before this year's debate has been provoked by singly Bill Lambert, fighter of nutrition, title of the future, food stamp program, mark as a food stamp program. You can see the Gizmo fights are coming. These houses should trigger the link debate. Now the links, their backlash links. There's no reason why Obama gets a blame to her, gets high to Guantanamo. Senator Rogan, indicates Obama's already claimed he's down. These houses should trigger the link. Seconds of world media indicates that Gizmo closure MPA discussions should trigger their losers. Link is not unique because CIR was already lost in being here. And here's Obama there. Now the plan popular arguments are been clocked. Evidence indicates that plan is popular within factions of the GOP who are trying to appeal to new demographics. Also, the plan indicates McCain gets on board, who's key to the agenda. More evidence. The plan no, that's actually good. Anything else, Nancy?
We're doing vegan pass off, right?
Do everything else first.
How much time do you have? Excuse me.
like, oh, they're going to just roll me on.
Sorry.
I got to read the plan text. And then they went for Excel.
It'll be terror, cred, politics.
Terror credit crimes.
Yep.
No terminal impact to terrorist arguments in case the organizations are so weak that they're not having the capability to access and attack. Their argument is that they would somehow have a safe haven within safe haven with Europe, but they cannot articulate a distinguishable scenario from terrorists having to use the global network to be able to acquiesce attack against the United States. Their own piece of evidence indicates that they would be able to attack London, which is not something that their scenario would trigger, rather a U.S. retaliation, which means they only have a capability for conventional attack, where this not the WD comprehensive data says the counterterrorism in the status quo is massively effective. That Al-Qaeda can not come together to be able to sufficiently have an attack. A massive all cause was conceded, i.e. oil dependence. There are words next to this, but I don't think there's a sufficient argument. Yes, even if you solve some resentment, terrorism is fundamentally inevitable, which means the process of which they would get an attack is inevitable, because people like in Saudi, there are indicates like the oil trade, and people having bases in Saudi Arabia continue to have resentment and fuel for terrorism, which means you have no terminally impact uniqueness for any scenario. You've also considered the levy evidence, which indicates you should not defer to existential threat, because it is not a worst case scenario analysis. Terrorists have so many hurdles that they have to pass. Each of them is an opportunity of which they could fail. It is risk adverse. If they are failing, they are not able to effectively deploy a weapon, which means it makes zero sense that they somehow still access their impact. If it somehow fails, that makes absolutely no sense. Their first impact, their first internal link is resentment. You have conceded the framing issue that NSC undermines all counterterror operations because it plagues problems that we have with military commissions, with the absence of litigation, which perpetuates massive errors, where we cannot have effective and smart counterterror policy to be able to have effective containment. Now, Al-Qaeda doesn't care. There are so many all causes. Our Joseph Nevins indicates things like Israel come up way more in the context of a recruitment tool rather than a detention policy. They barely even pay attention to it. If their argument is somehow that it's about local populations, or as so many evidence that they concede from the 2NC indicates, the local populations will continue to have anti-American resentment. They have it for a myriad of other reasons, like drone operations, which this card concludes and indicates local populations have massive opposition to. They say intel gathering. You consider Walt evidence that indicates you don't have a terminal impact of this, because allies who have an incentive to debunk from each other. They with the geopolitical position of the U.S. They have to cooperate. Our Mueller evidence indicates 9/11 united the world against terrorists. We will continue to cooperate. The 1NC evidence indicates intel sharing is sustainable. There's a high volume of intel sharing, which means even if we use the U.S., we will be able to interpret the communications from someone else, which means if that intelligence is so important, we will be able to access it. Our WASC evidence indicates there's extremely broad support in this aspect, which means sustainable intel sharing. They have no unique internal threshold of why this unique country is important, or offers us some intelligence that we would not be able to have the internal link articulation above. Answers their extradition, because it doesn't matter whether we have a particular individual that would have, if you don't have a terminal impact of terrorism or recruitment, is fundamentally inevitable credibility. There's no spillover. Fedwise evidence indicates that, yes, you can have a NATO impact, but you can have a broad NATO solves everything impact and spills over to biodiversity, ultimate actions, because there's no spillover between multiple different issues, between crisis and version of credibility or policy. Our true bullet evidence indicates NATO is sustainable and resilient. They have much more operations in the hopper that they're going to be continuing for. Our Cochrane evidence indicates things like Iraq, the Obama administration, which they thought was anti-European, that they've been able to survive through, which means the alliance is massively resilient. There's no impact of policy disagreements. So Zabowski evidence indicates Europe isn't even a key partner anymore. They're not sufficient, because we add a whole global warming agreement that we solved without the Obama evidence indicates because of massive budget cuts, NATO isn't able to deploy anymore because we have massive decreases. NSA is a substantial all-cause evidence indicates it undermined and overshadowed the EU summit. Our Medoc evidence indicates those leaks caused massive backlash and undermined cooperation with the EU and Germany. There's no terminal impact of being able to solve hegemony. There's not a correlation between them being stable internationally split in the 90s. Empirically disprove this impact articulation politics. The Iranian proliferation has caused widespread proliferation within the Middle East, causes massive miscalculation to nuclear conflict independently. Israel will first strike Iran in a preemptive strike that causes quick escalation to global conflict. That's our element always on time frame, which is the impact filter. The deal to the failure of the deal will be emboldened hardliners, which is the program on an overdrive their defenses, and assume this in conflict is uniquely like our limit evidence indicates Israel's prime minister, who says they will likely strike yes proliferation on 1NC internal evidence indicates that Iran will quickly acquire the capability and embolden hardliners if it fails. Embolden hardliners if it fails. The most qualified evidence indicates proliferation in the Middle East is possible as a reactionary threat, and indicates Pakistan will give Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons in retaliation to Iran. Their carry argument makes no sense in the context of our PC argument. Obama needs to make sure that he talks to his administration officials and mobilize them to persuade other Senate members. One of the PC evidence says Obama is key, which means yes, Kerry, but he's under the Obama administration. He's the one that is directing him to negotiate with other people. PC determines the direction of the sanctions. Vader Congress evidence indicates his political will, but political opponents are mounting forces. Obama needs the will to focus all in on sanctions. Yes, is all is focused there. They say no vote. Defense authorization is the only way that sanctions could be attached, but they could still come up independently legislation before next week, right? Before we go to the next round of the Geneva talks, which means the Vitter vote doesn't check anything because all of our PC evidence results as they say Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is a brand new thumper, which I shouldn't have to answer. We've run a top of the docket evidence, which you have conceded this is sanctions authorization will come first. They say Gitmo debate now. Their evidence does not say anything about Gitmo debate happening in the steps, but it's a very old piece of evidence in the first place, and at worst it's about the NDAA legislation, which is coming in December, which doesn't take out the sanctions debate because it's independent legislation. And these are just talks. The plan is the only thing that codifies a new piece of legislation. The triggers are linked. The link debate uniqueness was conceded, which means there's only a risk that they kill the entirety of the debate group. And our one evidence says overwhelmingly opposition to plan. Hardliners and the GOP fear the transfer in courts make us very vulnerable to terrorists. Pushing it through will be disastrous for Obama's agenda. There are evidence about Tea Partiers, which aren't key in the Senate to this bill. Status quo doesn't take out the link to Rogan evidence. Is about Obama's speech from May, which doesn't take out a current negotiation, nor does their Alexander evidence. Plan causes backlash, or Cheney evidence is transferred to civilian custody, causes domestic backlash, and deters Obama. Losers lose perception matter. Stripping Obama of authority kills his agenda. Other congressional members will line against him. It's not non-unique because it's a question of new legislation that kills Obama's authority. Empirical legislation is not the initiation in the context of war powers, which is what our internal link is about. McCain is relevant. He's already on board, which means you don't have in link uniqueness. Our Spelnick evidence indicates that he will agree to diplomatic efforts, and all of the Senate members that are key are already on board, which means there's only a risk that the plan changes any of their vote statuses.
Right. 5. How much? credibility politics.